Chapter 8 in Digital Mosaic addresses the question of whether journalists and politicians have been abandoning the public. In order to answer this question, we will be asking the following questions in the course of this presentation. What is, or who are, the public? What role does the media play in forming the identity of the public? How are politicians and government engaging with the public? And how do changes to communication technology, such as social media, impact the relationship between the three? The concept of public can be thought of in relation to its antithesis, the private. In contrast to activities that take place unseen in a private realm, the public's actions are visible. The public's activities often involve interaction between multiple actors. Therefore, political or civic activities and involvement in groups or associations are all public activities. Think about it in terms of engagement. A public exists when people engage with issues or activities that affect each other. In modern society, this engagement often takes place through mediated communication technology. Guided by Digital Mosaic, we will look at how changes in communication technology, and specifically the rise of social media, impact the public's engagement with political institutions. As modern society has grown in size and become more diverse, we now acquire a lot of our knowledge about the world through the mediation of communication technologies. It follows that the media have the power to influence the information available using framing and agenda setting. In other words, we only understand publicly visible events through information that is strategically presented to us. Therefore, if the work of journalists and the media at large is important so that the public may have knowledge of politics and other public events, then changes in media will impact the existence of an informed public. As media technology has become more fragmented and specialized, it is more difficult to build consensus based on a common reference point of information about public life. The risk is that the public will itself become more fragmented, or at least turn away from public institutions that it regards as less relevant.
McChesney cites a free media separate from the government as the key to a free society. Healthy journalism focuses on the needs of the public when it provides a rigorous account of people in power, separates truth from the lies, and produces a wide range of informed opinions. But the news media has been struggling to maintain its health, and the public is responding by turning to other sources to meet their needs or tuning out entirely. News media used to be comprised of newspapers and TV news programs. Now there are websites, blogs, and various social media platforms all trying to fill the role of journalism. News media organizations are under intense pressure to engage their audiences on all these platforms, and they have to act like business entities that rely on profits for their continued existence. Taras discusses several broad trends, including business decisions to increase profits and reduce expenses, such as media convergence and relying on easy news formulas. Let's look at each one. Taras goes into greater detail on the media juggernauts in Chapter 3. Suffice it to say that there are now fewer media organizations that own more sources of news. Their media properties can include newspapers, television networks, plus online sites. A small number of corporations now have the power to control the direction news media takes. We no longer know when journalists are representing the interests of the public and when they're representing the interests of their corporate owner. While they serve a vital role in a healthy democracy by informing the public, media organizations are first and foremost corporations focused on turning a profit. How their news arms perform can impact the bottom line. When a news organization acts like a business, it makes decisions that may conflict with its managerial role in society. For instance, Christopher Waddell cites budget cuts as causing the death of political reporting. Almost every Canadian news organization now has fewer reporters assigned to their parliamentary bureaus, if they have bureaus at all, and more reporters are becoming generalists, lacking the experience required for investigative reporting. They may resort to instant reporting and use social media sources to quickly build stories because they have no access to sources in the government. Journalists' reliance on social media to stay on top of stories and be connected to sources is a double-edged sword. Journalists are now on the job 24/7 looking for that next headline. And with fewer reporters on the job, they don't have the time to dig deeply into the important stories. They resort to BlackBerry journalism, meaning they primarily interact with the subject of stories through smartphones or social media. This can draw journalists too close to the politicians they're monitoring, breaking the impartial bridge between the public and politicians. Journalists are expected to do more with less time, resources, and experience. And media organizations will do whatever attracts public attention to stay in business. They rely on formulas to produce news that work, even if they do not serve the best interests of citizens. Terrace refers to hook and hold to describe keeping the viewer's attention. This is the standard diet of crime, accidents, and disasters that provides the fireworks of conflict that will grab eyeballs. It is easy to report and doesn't require much investigation. Horse race journalism relies on political polling that focuses on the win and loss aspect of politics. It's easy for the journalist to appear connected and maintain an aura of neutrality. Terrace says that media's obsession with polling has become in fact its greatest form of disengagement. Journalists will use pro and con formatting of news so that they maintain their aura of neutrality and will abandon important stories when they can't find an opposing view. This fear of being called biased means that many stories that are full of shades of gray or lack a clear opposing view may never reach the public. Journalistic voyeurism is a byproduct of the visual medium of television, where a picture is assumed to be worth 1,000 words. Reporters focus on personalities and scandals because it is easier to find an entertaining story in a politician's personal failings than it is to dig into his policies that truly impact society. Terrace tells us that the disengagement of journalism from the public is not clear-cut. With media convergence, reduced budgets, less experienced reporters, and a growing reliance on formulas proven to be profitable, there is a growing journalistic monoculture. Instead of presenting deep analysis and unique perspectives, news media simply offers the public a steady diet of uniform formulaic stories across all their channels. The public is responding by going elsewhere for their news or ignoring it entirely.
The media mediates between the government and political actors and the public, positioning itself to uphold democracy by acting as a watchdog for the public good. From the 1950s to the 1980s, there were few choices of radio and TV programming. Citizens couldn't help but be exposed to relatively high doses of news. As a result, they tended to be engaged citizens who followed public affairs and voted in elections. The internet emerged in the 1990s, and some thought it would be the gateway to a more open, inclusive, and dynamic democracy. It would give power back to the people and inspire new kinds of political activism. Citizens now have more sources of news than ever before. How has this impacted the relationship between citizens and politicians? There is a new law of social and political physics at play. With a greater number of choices, there is a greater political polarization within society. But even with a multitude of choices available, some citizens avoid news entirely. This leads to a domino effect. The less people are exposed to news, the less interest they have in politics, and hence their level of civic engagement decreases. While citizens may no longer be engaged in political affairs, they spend a lot of time online. Social media has become increasingly powerful cultural and political force, with billions of people online. It is to the point that its effects are now altering the course of global events. Politicians, too, are on social, but who are they talking to? Government communicators are often mass-producing public discourse and can easily be caught in the message ninja routine. Tamara Small points out that politicians want to control their messages, so they adopt a standard party message discipline to avoid being challenged. Their online communication is similarly a one-way street. They use Facebook and Twitter to broadcast messages rather than to engage and interact with citizens. Broadcasting is time effective and lets politicians engage directly with the public. For example, in the Representative for Children and Youth Government office where I work, we no longer send news releases via email to our media contacts. We now distribute them solely via Twitter. This is more time effective and reduces redundancy. Politicians still use most of their old tools to communicate with the public. Question period, scrums, formal interviews, leaders, campaign tours, election advertising, and the leaders' debates are just a few to name. However, citizens engage with these rituals of political communications has changed. Politicians want tight control over what the press conveys to the public. They stay rigidly on message, even if it means not answering a question from the press. Campaign tours are scripted for TV, and party leaders use locations as their backdrops and citizens as props to help deliver their carefully crafted messages. The press is forced to report the message they are handed, and the public is fed homogeneous news coverage with little in-depth analysis. Broadcasting messages can be time effective, but the audience seeks authenticity of a direct connection. However, few politicians want to use social media to engage in conversations with citizens. Accidentally tweeting a political opinion can lead to disaster. For example, politicians could be criticized for retweeting messages from one group rather than another, or responding from some direct messages and not others. Just as politicians and government agencies want to control their public communication and broadcast their message directly to citizens, technology gives citizens the power to choose how they will engage in the political process. They can bypass the news coverage and go straight to live streaming of question period or government meetings. They use YouTube to view clips of important political and cultural events and then engage in online discussion. Social media has the potential to create super citizens who access information online, view speeches, engage in debates, and tweet directly to politicians. Manju says that social media has subsumed and gutted mainstream media. Social networks will fundamentally rewire human society by changing how the citizens communicate with each other. Once marginalized groups and individuals now grow into influential social organizations on platforms like Facebook and gain world-shattering power. And yet many citizens are happy and able to take the news snacks put out for them on social networks and by politicians and government. They don't debate issues with one another, nor with politicians who are more likely to broadcast their message. These peekaboo citizens, as Terrace calls them, will opt in or out of the political process at will. Their attention is divided and fleeting. Peekaboo citizens challenge democracy, which functions best when there is a political savvy and informed public. Social media offers great power to politicians who want to interact with citizens, and for the public to be in direct dialogue with their political leaders. However, politicians fear losing control of their message and use social media mostly as a broadcast medium. Citizens, on the other hand, are disengaged with the public political process and are connecting with other like-minded citizens.
If media fragmentation and the proliferation of social media has disrupted the public's connection between journalists, politicians, and the public, then we believe that the problem is largely a structural one. Yet, it is beyond the scope of this presentation to consider such structural solutions to these problems. However, where should we look to find solutions to these structural problems? We believe that we need to find solutions in creating sustainable media structures that can maintain a critical flow of quality information between the public and public institutions. Yes, it's a challenge, but we believe that we need to meet the challenge in order to sustain a healthy democratic society which relies on an engaged public informed by quality information in a public space.